So if the cosmos, as we see through our telescopes,
That's again, it is the if, right? Again, pointing out that his story here is based on imagination, not a direct reference to anything I can refer to in my everyday. So it's if this thing I have come up with, which is beyond your experiences, right? But just be very strict about what you're following here. If you're going down this road, you're going into imagination, right? It's an if. It's philosophy based on an if. And that if is upon you as a listener. He can't decide that it's given, that he can go to, in my analogy, that he can go to Italy because he hasn't got the car yet. It's still an if. If there is a car, I can go to Italy. Yeah, well, let's sit and wait for that if to become the case. Well, it can't, because he can't go there, right? The car is beyond his reach because it's beyond his experiences. So he can never get an answer to that if. So if you go along with this, you're basing your whole philosophy potentially on an if. That is another way of saying imagination, right? And let's take a stab at what it means to imagine something. Imagination, in my opinion, is based on cognition, right? When you cognize elephant and tiger and bicycle, you can take parts of these cognitions and put them together and create a elephant bicycle. If you've seen Toy Story, that evil child that are, splitting up the various parts of the toys and sticking them together. Well, yeah, but they are basically just concepts pulled apart and stitched together in a different way. It's still the same concepts or sub-concepts, right? Like arm or leg or wheel and so on. So he's not coming up with anything he's describing that is outside. He's still describing his inside. Now, when it gets more abstract is when you get to like patterns, very simple patterns and geometry and mathematics and so on. That is very much removed from your everyday experience, you would say, except that it's still derived from the experience, right? Because it's also used to describe the experience and how it moves about in science. So when you're extracting circles and triangles and spheres and lines from these cognitions and this spatial experience, these are still something going on the inside because they're descriptions or extractions from that experience. Now, because they're so abstract, they might start to sound like something that could possibly be out there because they're so abstract, right? But he's still referring to something going on his inside, right? And that's the trick. Extract yourself into abstractions. Pretend that they could as well be, they're little ripples or equations floating in a vacuum or something weird like that, right? The trick is for people like this, and I think the urge comes from I'm so dissatisfied with the everyday experience is so annoying that I basically want to kill myself. Now I'm not blaming any particular person here. I'm just coming up with it's the existential angst and the problems of bare existence, or so what do you want to call it, the everyday existence. What if I could go into some safe space or cloud castles and find some meaning and explanation from anywhere where I basically can come up with whatever I want? Doesn't that sound like an interesting job, an interesting avenue to follow, right? Yeah, but then fucking stay in those cloud castles and go away from me, right? Because I'm living in my everyday and I'm trying to get a grasp of my everyday using philosophy that describes the experience that I call the everyday, right? Because if I meet that Bernardo Kastrup in my everyday, I want to have an idea how to approach him, right? But he's staying in his fucking cloud castles, so I don't know what to do with him, other than saying, I'm not going there. I'm not interacting with a Bernardo Kastrup, right? I might deconstruct his philosophy here, but I can't work with him in an everyday because he's living in his fucking weirdo cloud castles, right? So we can meet in reality, so to say, or an everyday. We can't meet in an everyday, right?
The Hubble, through the James Webb Telescope, if this physical cosmos is a representation of the mind.
Now it's a cosmos. How many terms have we been using that potentially could be describing that external world he does not have access to, right? It's cosmos, it's reality, it's universe, it's interpersonal subjectivity, it's spatially unbound something, I don't know, you can keep going. I mean, it's almost on Monty Python level of stupidness, right? He's just sitting there thinking he's fucking brilliant and then just basically throwing words at you, right? Yes, there's some cohesion, there's some structure to his speaking. The words are grammatically correct and he's using terms that I might understand, but I might also misunderstand them, right? And if he's using 5 or 6 different terms for the same thing, or potentially for the same thing, he's basically saying he's full of shit. I mean, how else would you interpret it, right? And if they are not describing the same thing, the same aspect, why is he not clarifying the difference? And if they are describing the same thing, why are you using 6 different descriptions, right?
Of nature, its mental processes. How do we reconcile?
Now he's saying it's processes, right? If you have a color, sound, and so on, right? The right way to refer to them is color, sound, taste, smell, and so on, right? Why are they all of a sudden processes? So he's implying there's an interpretation that is intrinsic to that experience. No, he's just adding an interpretation as if it's sort of, hey, I think I'm going to give this an intrinsic interpretation that just arrives without my bringing the interpretation in. And that's not the first time he's done that, I believe, right?
It with what we know about the cosmos, like, say, the theory of the Big Bang, which is an event that supposedly happened 3.8 billion years ago and set out the universe in a continuous expansion and complexification thanks to quantum fluctuations and other processes we know about nature. How can we accommodate the Big Bang into...
I've always been a little sort of, okay, how can anybody possibly set a time frame on this? I'm not going against the Big Bang theory. I think it's so far the best. Whatever, something. It started somewhere smaller and now it's bigger, right? Fair enough. What happened 1 microsecond after that beginning somewhere, I don't really care about. I actually don't care much about what happened the first 13.5 billion years. I only really care about what happened the last 500 million years. And you could say, why would I really care about that? Wouldn't I want to care about what's actually going on now and what might happen in the future, right? How would I go about doing that? I would need a philosophy about my everyday, wouldn't I, right? So I'm longing for the point where he gets to, okay, now we're going to talk about, for instance, concepts and cognitions like apples and oranges and bicycles, right? And how we understand that as a kind of knowledge and come with some definitions and so on, right? Of truth and propositions and objectivity, which he has mentioned but never defined, right? And when we get to some kind of moral principle or something like that, right? I bet you he will not be going there. He will stop. Now I'm creating my metaphysics. Therefore, everything apparently implicitly should be explained, right? No, it's just a starting point. Now you only got the car, right? Potentially. I would say in his attempt at metaphysics, he can never get to a car, right?
To this analytic idealist perspective. Let me start by saying that I personally do take the Big Bang very seriously. There are other cosmological hypotheses out there that are less empirically substantiated than the Big Bang. And in recent times with the James Webb, there are some people even making noise that the James Webb telescope has shown that the Big Bang is not true. I think that is nonsense. I think the pictures show
Or you think it's nonsense? Okay. Well, personally, I have no problem with that story. It's fine. Now leave it the fuck alone, right? Don't spend people's money in trying to figure out what happened 13.8 billion years ago, right? It doesn't matter. Because what we have is what we have now. It's better to try to figure out how do we interact in the future in a way where we don't destroy ourselves, or where I don't have to pay for something that I don't want, for instance, and so on, right? It's like, oh, it's so important what happened 13.8 billion years ago. But you just have to pay taxes, you little stupid monkey, right? Yeah. If you go out and work and create something, somebody has to take half of that and give it to somebody else, right? Yes, that's simply the best ethics in the history of human beings. After 13.8 billion years, this is what we have come up with. If you don't give this shit to these people there, they will shoot you dead, right? Or put you in a cage if they manage to overpower you. That's the basic ethics we are working from now, right? I don't think the Big Bang is going to help clarify whether that's good ethics, right?
no such a thing. They only show that our particular cosmological models about the early evolution of the universe need some work, need some fine-tuning. But the evidence suggesting that the universe has expanded from a singularity is overwhelming. The cosmic radiation background even shows where the quantum fluctuations happened that gave birth to stars, planets, galaxies, galaxy clusters, and so on and so forth out of the...
Can you have a where that is sort of 13 billion years ago? Because the where is different then than it is now because of the expansion. And what about time? Does time change in an expanding universe? Time isn't it a part of mind? So you're using an idea, a mental idea of time, which I would call a mental representation of differentiation between events in the past, in the memory, right? So it's a part of my mind. So there's not time out there, right? But if I want to describe that distance, quote, between the beginning and now, I would use time, which is a mental representation.
Initially uniform field of energy.
I want to, all this, time apparently changes in relativity. So if things are relative, that time is dependent on where you are in the universe. You have to stay in the same place from the beginning until now to have 13.8 billion years ago, right? If you're traveling by the speed of light, time stands still, you're still at the beginning, aren't you? Or what? I don't know, I'm not, in these theories, right?
That arose immediately after the Big Bang. So I take the Big Bang very seriously. And some people might then say, well, if you take it seriously, Bernardo, then there was a universe prior to the rise of life. Life arose on this planet, the Earth, about 4 billion years ago. We used to think 3.5. I think the latest is 4 billion years ago. And the Big Bang happened 13.8 billion years ago. So what was the universe before life? Because according to Analytic Idealism, the physical universe is a cognitive representation of living beings. If there is no living being to cognitively represent the universe, then there is no physical universe.
No. That's stupid argumentation. Right? That's the inverse of the teapot, right? That's the opposite of the teapot. It's saying you can't know if there's a teapot out there, so there is a teapot. Or you could say, well, you can't go there, check, so there can't be a teapot. How can you possibly think that this is good logic. I hesitate to call it logic, but let's call it logic, right? There were nobody there, therefore it wasn't there. So he thinks, apparently, that whatever exists appears when you look at it, or smell it, or taste it. If I'm depraved of these senses, there is no water that I'm suspended in, right? Because I'm not experiencing it. So everything disappears if I'm depraved of my senses, apparently. This is, Crazyville, right? I mean, who would want to infect their thinking with this bullshit, right? Why would you want to do this unless you want to come up with some God mind that takes care of you and says it's okay. You're born a sinner, but you can't help it, so it's not your fault. You go out and do what you want. It's not your fault. So life feels more gentle, and not all these capitalists out there forcing me to work for them.
Is the representation. Physicality is the dashboard. If there is no airplane flying around the sky, there is no dashboard. But that doesn't mean that there is no sky. The sky exists.
Okay, so it does exist, apparently.
Whether there is an airplane measuring it and showing the measurements on the dashboard or not. So the universe, existence, whatever it is.
So now he says it exists. So now he says, just because you can't go and check Jupiter, there is a teapot. Right? He's either saying, because you can't go there, it isn't the case, or because you can't go there, it is the case. Neither of these I'm supporting. I'm saying, you can go there. Because you can't go there, right? You can't mentally go there. You should shut the fuck up about what it is. Don't say it isn't the case or that it is the case. Say, I have no fucking clue because I can't know. That's the only parsimonious, correct, stance that will make you turn your back to this outside world and deal with your actual experiences. Rather than jumping into the clouds and never come back, right? And become somebody who doesn't care about these weird colors and sounds and so on, right? Just pay your fucking taxes, monkey. Shut up and let me sit here and talk about my cloudcasters, right?
In and of itself, has existed before life, before an organism arose that would represent it on its own dashboard. But the universe is not physical. Physicality is a representation of the universe. So before life, there was no such representation, but the universe was there. Whatever
How the hell does he know? How the hell does he know? Just because somebody came up with the idea or the theory, that means it was there? That's a bit of a stretch, isn't it, right? Somebody came up with a theory, therefore it was there. The answer to the question of what is there, there is no answer to the question, what is out there, before you state how you get to there is out there, right? His argument, to recapture, is, well, I'm starting to call my experiences, my qualia and so on, a dashboard. Aha! So when you call it a dashboard, it means that it's a representation. That's his fucking argument, right? He's saying, I have some colors and sounds. I think I'm going to call it a dashboard. Oh, when you call something a dashboard, it means it's a representation of something. So I guess there is something beyond the dashboard. Right? I have not seen any arguments here that is better than that argument. I'm rephrasing it a bit to point out its ridiculousness, right? That's what he's saying. He's saying, I'm starting to call this a dashboard. And because I call it a dashboard, the meaning of the term dashboard is something that is a representation of something else. So because I called it a dashboard, there is something outside the colors and sounds and so on, right? The dashboard. That's his argumentative structure. He is as honest as he says, if you're willing to go there, right? Then it's a fact. Which is basically ridiculous argumentation. But at least he puts it on you to say, okay, I'm willing to go there, right? That's his deepest philosophy. His deepest philosophy in very, very, very short terms is, I have some colors, sounds, and taste, and so on. And maybe a few cognitions and whatever, right? That potentially follows, which, like matter, for instance, right? Which is a description. It's an interpretation of those qualia, right? Okay. I think I'm going to call it a dashboard. Oh, the meaning of dashboard is it's a representation of something. So I guess there's something beyond the dashboard. Right? That's his deepest philosophy, right? You know where he can stick that philosophy, right?
Personal mental processes corresponded to the universe before the rise of life. They were there. There was mentation in them.
In this regard, doing a deconstruction is, for me, to attempt to get to that step. Those leaps that are completely unfounded. It's just based in screwing around with the terms, right? When you find those, you can basically reject everything that person refers to after that, right? What could possibly follow from that argumentation structure. Because if it's invalid, he can't go there, right? Just like you can't go to Italy if there is no car, right? So if he's basing his trip to Italy on an idea of a car, he's not going to Italy, is he, right? As much as he wants to sit there and claim that he's in Italy. So, the purpose of a deconstruction like this is, well, if I can find a fucking basically stupidity at the founding level of his metaphysics, I can basically say, fuck off you, right? Because I need a better foundation for all the rest that you're coming up with, which is based on this fallacious jump, right? I don't buy it because if there is no car, we're not going to Italy, no matter how many photos, how many internet links, how many ideas, how many fabulations, and so on and so on and so on you can do about Italy. We are not going to fucking Italy if you don't have that car, right?
The mind of nature before life arose. And we model that early mentation along the lines of what we call Big Bang theory. So the Big Bang is something roughly similar to it, roughly similar to a rapid expansion. Colloquially, I could even say an explosion, although that's not quite accurate, but something like an explosion happened in the mind of nature. I believe so.
In the mind of...
I believe
similar.
so from a conceptual perspective.
But isn't nature the Big Bang or what? What are we talking about? Isn't it the same? I mean, oh man. Oh, let me go back more than 13 billion years and talk about what happened there. And it might have become a mental explosion that you are now seeing, right? It's an exploding mind. And you are part of the explosion and you're dissociated. Show me the fucking car, right? Show me the fucking car, right? I need to experience it. I need to cognize it, right? I need to classify it as a car. If I can't do that, I don't give a fuck about your trip to Italy, right? Fuck off, man.
Perspective. We can get in a level deeper where I might tell you that this is just a convenient theory, but I'm not going there in this course. As far as convenient theories are concerned, the Big Bang is a very, very convenient one, an almost inescapable one. And it's entirely reconcilable with analytic idealism. There was mentation in the mind of nature before life arose. And if there would have been life looking at it back then, that life would have seen it as something more or less like an explosion. There was no life. Nobody saw it that way. But that doesn't mean that the sky wasn't there before airplanes started flying. Something happened 13.8 billion years ago. Now, was there mentation before that?
Oh, give me a fucking break, man, right? It's enough that you're going back 13 billion years. Now you're going back 100 billion years? Was there mentation before? I mean, these academics, man, right? I mean, it's an insult to injury that I'm being forced to pay for these hordes of academics sitting and spouting all this fucking bullshit, right? Basically calling people monkeys and encouraging them to strangle themselves or something like that, right? Disclaimer, I don't support that. He's a fucking idiot when he says that, right? I have to sit and listen to this crap. And he's not the only one. There are hordes of weirdo academics who are basically hiding in their academic ivory tower to avoid manual labor, right? So they are depending on somebody stealing some money from somebody else to give to them so they can survive in their ivory tower. That's why they're never coming up with some kind of ethics, but because that might end up pointing to it being immoral, that you're being stolen from to pay for these idiots, right? That's why they're staying in the cloud castles. They're never coming into ethics because they know where it's going to lead and they won't bite the fucking hand that feeds them, right?
That question is impossible to answer in a coherent way. And the reason is the same models that tell us that something like a Big Bang happened also tell us that there was no time before the Big Bang. So to ask what happened before the Big Bang is as...
There was no time? So no, you're categorizing time as some kind of existence out there? How do you get to that? Are you just not throwing everything into some big bag where I can't go and check it, but you can, using your fancy metaphysics, you can come up with all sorts of story about that, which is put out there somehow. Oh, it's just a representation, but I'm talking about it as if I'm experiencing it, right? You're blurring this line between when are you actually talking about your personal experience and your ideas about what is going on out there, right?
As absurd a question as to ask what is the marital status of the number 5. It's the wrong question to ask. And I know it's very hard to wrap one's mind around it because we have to think in terms of time. There was time before the Big Bang, but unfortunately, no. There was
time? Time is not something that is like an elephant or a color or something like that. It's only a mental structure that you can't experience. In the sense of a qualia, so to say, right? And then we can sort of discuss what do I mean when I say experience. You could say elephant is also an experience, okay? But now it's sort of what terms do we use to what part of what is going on in my mind, right? Or what terms am I using to describe what is going on in my mind? And then you might refer to my recent metaphysics video to get an idea, right? And it surely can be optimized, what I've done there, right? This is just a peek into the way I think. It's not a perfect description of the metaphysics, right? Please understand that. And CJ, right? The commenter, I have no patience with you, right? Because you basically keep pounding questions at me. These 60 questions or something, and then you just say, I don't buy it. Yes, I need Bernardo Kastrup because I like it. And we all like that. We all need that. Therefore, it's like, give me a fucking break, man. What kind of child are you, right? And I quickly had a notion that this is what kind of sort of personality. I've seen that a lot of times, right? People, when I criticize something else or deconstruct it, somebody who's a fanboy or fangirl over there, they come back to me and try to pound at my video to make me sort of shut up and go away, right? It only encourages me. Be warned. When people attack me like this, I just take it as an ad hominem. I don't take it as philosophy. They ask questions about how I deconstruct and about my philosophy, and I present it as, as patiently as I want to be. But at some point, I might end up saying, okay, fuck off, right? I'm not spending more time on you, right? I'm giving you my time for free, right?
No time before the Big Bang. Time is an emergent phenomenon of what happened after. Before the Big Bang, there was no time, and there was not even space. So the Big Bang didn't happen in a place. There was no place. To explore this in more detail, would have to go much deeper into the physics of it, but it's beyond the scope of what we are doing here.
Oh, so I can't explain it. I can't explain to you what happened 13.8 billion years ago because the physics is too complicated for your stupid little monkey mind, right? Yes, so you have to read my books. Yes, 13.8 billion years ago. We have to deal with that. We have to deal with that in my metaphysics, right? Yeah, whatever you experience now in your everyday is not really important. No, I'm going to deal with what happened 13.8 billion years ago. You pay your fucking taxes and shut up. I'm going to tell you about what happened 13.8 billion years ago because that's a very important part of metaphysics, right? Okay, the next one is going to be called part 6 of his, is called When We Die and the Meaning of Life. Okay, right? So it's like, yes, we are going into these sort of religious connotations, right? The meaning of life, right? When we die, why would I care what happens when I die? I want to have a good idea what I'm going to do while I'm alive, right? When I die, I can't help it anyway, right? And what happens? Whatever happens, happens, right? If something else happens, okay. Apparently you can't go back and tell people who are alive what happens when you're dead, right? So I find it quite likely that nothing actually happens because there is nothing there where anything can happen because it's a mental experience, right? Whatever happens at that point, end of story, in my opinion, right? Yes, if something happens, I'll take it when it comes, right? But at this point, I'm alive. I don't want to think about what happens when I die, right? Or when I'm dead. Dying is sort of a process of some kind, you could say, right? Or a description of a process, maybe, right? Or an ending of a process, maybe, right? I don't really care what it is, right? And I don't care what happens when I'm dead. It's not my fucking problem, right? I want to have an idea of what to do from now on until I die, right? And how do I go about interacting with other individuals who might have some fucking crazy idea of what I should do, right? That's what I want to get to, right? Does this help me? Not in any fucking way, right? Other than saying this is fucking crazyville, right? So I think we'll stop here because it would be a good idea to step into part 6 in the next part. And I did some recapturing what he has been doing in these presentations so far, and it sort of aligns itself with countless other presentations that he's done in the same fashion on podcasts and wherever, right? There's nothing new under the sun here as far as I can see, right? So I'm just sort of deconstructing it slightly differently here and then the other things I've been doing around Bernardo Kastrup, and trying to keep pounding at where this falls short of any useful philosophy, in my opinion, right? So, I mean, of course, at the end of the day, this is my deconstruction. This is my approach to philosophy, or my approach to how to deal with somebody else's philosophy and pointing out potential flaws in it, right? Now, I would say, my personal opinion is, my personal philosophy is, everybody is working from some kind of agenda when they're doing philosophy, and all sorts of other things they do, right? But also when they're doing philosophy, they are working from an agenda. My task potentially is to figure out what might that agenda be. And good sophists, talented sophists, are very good at hiding that agenda, so it sounds like objective philosophy. But underneath, they're connecting the dots and leading you where they want you to go, right? As I pointed out that Bernardo Kastrup does here, right? There is also always an underlying agenda. It might be very different kinds of agenda that are underlying, right? And I guess your task is to figure out what the fuck is my agenda, right? What might my agenda be? I might even not fully understand what my agenda is. I'm going with my intuitions, basically, right? But I must have some kind of, that's what Hume called the passions and so on. You don't do anything without you have some kind of passion somewhere, right? In this context, I call it an agenda, right? Because it's usually some fully formed ideas about, it's not just an emotion or passion, but it's more a fully formed idea of where things should lead in the conclusions and so on, right? So I would like to call it an agenda rather than a passion. But it's the same thing. You don't go somewhere without having idea why you're going there, right? Yes, you could say, my heart is beating. I didn't choose my heart to beat. No, because you're not allowed to choose whether or not your heart should beat, right? The body is taking care of that, because any other choice than the heart keeps beating is the heart is not beating, right? Or not beating correctly. And that is the end of story, right? So therefore, there's no reason why you should be able to choose it. The body, I mean, I can turn it in on myself and I can kill myself, right? And then stop the heart. But then it's sort of end of story in another way, right? And then maybe that's the difference between human beings and other animals, that other animals tend not to kill themselves, right? Because they are not aware of, maybe that's if you find an animal that is doing suicide, and I don't know if there are animals that does that, but then it's built into the genes, not in the, the kamikaze, are there kamikaze bees or something like that? I don't know, but it's not because they choose it, they check into, and then they, kamikaze, right? It's not that they're having a bad day and another bad day and another bad day, and then they decide, okay, I'm going to kill myself, right? Figuring out what your agenda is. How do I figure out a person's agenda? Well, I might want to look at how their curriculum, you could say, right? How do they describe their parents? How do they describe their upbringing? How do they approach pair bonding, or children and family, and all these sorts of things? That might give you an idea of where we're going, right? I'm not saying it's a clear cut, but that's what you have to work with, right? And my idea is, or we could say it's an axiom, everybody has an agenda. And I would say that the quality of your philosophy is the extent to which you can reject your own agenda in order to get to the right conclusion about philosophy. It has to be somehow, you have to disconnect from yourself to do good philosophy, so to say, right, in this regard. Stay with me, right? Maybe those are not the right terms for me to use. But it's sort of, you have to be disciplined and not let yourself being dragged along by your own psychology, right? It's like some of my philosophy had really triggered somebody because it's so out of left field, you could say, in some, and I don't find it to be that way. It's just a logical conclusion of my philosophy. And if you can point to flaws in my foundational philosophy, please let me know, right? I might have to change it. But so far, it holds water as best to my understanding, right? And when I deconstruct somebody doing it differently, I always find some flaws in it, right? They're contradicting themselves, they're taking unfounded leaps and so on, right? And it all smells of there is an underlying agenda. Otherwise, why would you do it? If you didn't want to go a particular direction to get to a preconceived idea, right? It's also this aimless philosophy feels weird to most people, I would say, right? This all-encompassing categorization and structured philosophy is what I think should be done in order to avoid your own agenda, rather than just cherry picking. Okay, Carl Jung said something I like, I'm writing a book about Carl Jung. Okay, Schopenhauer said something I like, I'm writing a book about Schopenhauer, right? Bernardo Kastrup. Cherry picking the story so it leads where I want to go, right? Agenda. Okay, please share, like, and subscribe. Give me a comment and consider a donation. I would like to have some more donations. I only have a few, and thank you to those who are donating. I appreciate it very much. It's very generous of you, and but I wouldn't mind some more, right? Maybe I can upgrade the scenario, the the experience somehow, right? Maybe buy a fancy microphone or create a studio. Who knows, right? But otherwise, and maybe it's not needed, right? But and it's encouraging that people send me something, and it doesn't have to be much. I wouldn't mind. If you want to send me $1 million, please, right? I wouldn't mind. But it's just for the mostly for the encouragement, and then I can go buy a nice bottle of red wine and enjoy those qualia, which is just encouraging to me, right? Okay, see you in the next one.